I had the thought because I was looking at these things. I'm like, wait a second. These are going to be like Harridan's Wall in northern England 2,000 years from now. People are like, oh yeah, the one time these Empire of the West, yeah, right. And so these monolithic T-walls are never going to leave because they just won't. And so I'm having my reality of the situation, and also knowing that we're going to be prime targets for the Taliban when they get pissed off at us. And so we're driving through wastelands, that hasn't seen a human in months. And I see these Connexes. They're an MWR washing machine facility, like a laundry facility. You just drop your stuff off, right? Used to run for whatever. I'm sure the contract was like $100,000 a month back then. But they're just sitting completely unused. There's washing machines and dryers in there full of dust and sand. And I'm like, these will do. So I call the EOD guys. I'm like, hey, give me 2 120 rounds. Rig them up on top of this Connex and blow them up. And the EOD guys are like, why? I was like, because I told you to. They're like, are we going to get in trouble? I was like, who the hell's here to get anybody in trouble? Like, no one knows we're here. And I mean, this is also the same kind of equation where you'd expect like a zombie to come out, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, hey, like the Taliban could legitimately be hiding in one of these buildings and they're just going to ambush us, right? So it was a really weird apocalyptic dynamic. But so we blew up these 120s on top of these Connexes because that's what would probably come in. And this Connex blew out like a sardine can and flame, fire, and everything else. And I looked at it and I was like, holy shit, like we're going to die if we start taking indirect because this much sheet metal protects us. And this mortar's coming in at 100 to 200 miles an hour. And the shrapnel is just going to shred through like 3 or 4 Connexes. Like it's insane to see what a 120 will do. It's actually terrifying. And so I put my brain against this. I'm like, well, I don't want any of my guys to die. I don't want me to die. I don't want anybody to die with an indirect. And so I take these metal Air Force pallets and I put them out in the range. I get a drone and I'm looking above it and I'm launching mortars onto it and finally get a direct hit, evaluate the explosion pattern. And it's brutal, even through metal, thicker metal, right? And so I'm like, all right. And so drawing from like World War II, like you ever seen the old German tanks? They have the extra armor like bolted on like a foot off or 2 feet off. I'm like, what if we do that, but like vertically? And so I do a sandbag layer and like a vertical plywood layer to do an early detonation and catch all the shrapnel and everything else. And it works like a charm. It's amazing. I'm like, oh my God, like a couple bags of sand and, some plywood and an Air Force pallet can save somebody's life. And so we do this, I put it in a report and I send it out and we do it on our base, but then a general, like there's a general in Afghanistan, he gets the spreadsheet and he's like, holy shit, this is amazing. And so he's like, let's do this for every living quarter in Afghanistan, right? Like the fact that you combat tested it, you did a thorough examination on it. And he's like, yeah, we're going to do it on every remaining U.S. base in Afghanistan. And I mean, it was to the point where there were privates in Kuwait loading up sandbags, putting them on pallets and flying them into Afghanistan just so we had more sandbags. And at the end of the brief, the general was like, good job. Oh, but by the way, how are you going to pay for that MWR laundry facility and those 3 Air Force pallets you destroyed? And I'm looking at him, I'm like, are you cracking a joke right now? Like, or are you really serious? And I'm like sitting there, I'm trying to absorb the situation and read the room because he's like dead face. And he's like, yeah, we'll have to look into how that's going to get budgeted out. And I'm like, what do you mean? We're leaving, $10,000 T-walls and like MWR facilities and like everything through the roof. And you're going to talk about coming after me for like some Air Force pallets? And then the Air Force actually found out what we were doing with their pallets because that was going to be the default for every layer. And Air Force was like flying in pallets by the tens to give to Afghanistan because they thought it was going to be part of the evacuation, not knowing that it was going to be part of the defense plan, the pre-detonation layer. And as soon as the Air Force found out about that, they like turned their C-17 back and flew. Like, you are not getting 1,000 Air Force pallets to blow up. But yeah, so the cognitive dissonance, right? Like, oh yeah, we're in an Alamo situation. We're calling our family, as often as we can to tell them we're alive. And we're building a pre-detonation layer and like experimenting at this level.
Already abandoned spots.
Already abandoned spots. And then this individual is saying, oh yeah, but And then, it goes back to what they know, right? Your base level of training. Like, oh, but how are you going to pay for it? And I was like, I don't know. I'll start a GoFundMe page. I don't know, right? Like, I'm just trying to keep my guys alive for when a 120 comes in. But what's interesting about that, that was like March, April timeframe, right? Like, it was getting bad. Things were trending very poorly. No official decision had been made. But then when the decision got made, we had 10 days to pull out, that sort of thing. We consolidated. I ended up back in Kabul. It was like the last exit. Talking to General Sadat, who's in Helmand, and we lose comms with him one night because the Taliban had absolutely cut all cell phone towers, all radio towers, all everything, right? They'd been planning this for months. So it's kind of like the Tet Offensive. You just wake up and like everything's on fire. And so May 1st, I think it was, we don't get in contact with General Sadat until like May 3rd or 4th. And he's like, yeah, I'm talking to him. He's like, yeah, we lost 40 checkpoints, like da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, hold on. What do you mean you lost 40 checkpoints? He's like, well, we lost these and we're pretty sure we lost those. And like the first 10 on his list were like 10 hypercritical, can't lose. If you ever lose these, like, you've lost the region. But to know that he lost an additional 30 on top of that and an additional 10 maybe on top of that, and I'm like, all right, sir, appreciate it. Good luck. We'll send you air if we got it. Call me tomorrow if there's cell phone towers in place. And so I go and tell the brief that night, and I give the briefing to the general. I'm like, hey, sir, Helmand's lost. Like, it's gone. And the general's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, General Sadat lost these checkpoints, top 40, but these top 10 were hypercritical. There's, 0 to no history of ever recovering a checkpoint, and knowing what we know, probably, this information is 24, 48 hours old. It's worse. Yeah. To General Sadat's credit, he held out longer than anyone would have expected. But essentially, knowing that Helmand had been all those critical checkpoints were gone, and you're like, wait a second, like there is no Helmand. There might be a town or two left, but there's nothing. And I tell this to the general, and the general was like, well, my analysts are telling me that everything's going to be fine in 48 hours. I'm like, and I take a moment, I take a professional pause. I'm like, well, I know your analysts, and I have been on tour with your analysts, and I've watched your analysts walk into the same Afghan headquarters that I walked into. And I watched as the Afghans were struggling to put an HDMI cable into a TV with like a bank of like Afghan headquarters with like, 40 TVs. And like 6 Afghans were struggling to put an HDMI cable in the right direction. Meanwhile, on one of the one working TVs over there, there's guys getting overrun on an Afghan checkpoint. And this is supposed to be the headquarters. No one's responding to that TV. So I'm like, shake the guy. I'm like, hey, screw this TV that's not even plugged in. What about those guys that are getting killed right there? And the Afghans are like, oh, we can't do anything for them. And I'm like, oh, you guys can't do anything for anybody. Fuck, right? And this was, April, May timeframe, April-ish. And so for this to fast forward into late May now, or mid-late May, where they've lost all the checkpoints and everything else, I was like, no, there's no way there's going to recover, right? But from that analysis, right, I wrote back that like, hey, Afghan command is completely incapable of, I literally used the example of like plugging in this, let alone responding to that. That analyst wrote to the general saying, the new capacity and capabilities are amazing. They have so much potential, right? Like this guy was a sycophant, which is basically an ass kisser to the nth degree. And so here I am talking to the general, and the general was like, yeah, well, my analyst said Helmand's going to be fine in 48 hours. And I look at him, I look at his analyst, I look at him, and I was like, okay, sir, I disagree with your analyst. And he's like, well, I called General Sadat. And he says, he called General Sadat, and General Sadat said it was going to be recaptured within 48 hours. And I'm like, politely, sir, I've worked with General Sadat, and I know for a fact he hasn't recaptured a single checkpoint in 3 months that he's ever lost. And this general and I just kind of have a stare off. I'm not telling him he's a liar. I'm just telling him his facts are wrong. And the general finally turns to me. He's like, well, would you agree with me? Right? So when a general tells you, will you agree with me? He's like, will you agree with me that everything's going to be fine in 48 hours? And I looked at him. I ran my whole career through my head. And I said, sir, I'll give you an answer in 48 hours. But right now, Helmand's lost. And he looked at me. He's like, okay, cool, no problem. Like, we're not going to get in a pissing match, right? He wins, right? He's a general. That night, a night order goes out saying there will be no Special Forces warrant officers briefing the generals ever again. I am the only Special Forces warrant officer out of a staff of 50 briefing generals. And I'm like, I read the memo. I'm like, oh, great, good. Like my war in Afghanistan is over, right? And so 36 hours later, General Sadat's evacuated. Hellman's like no longer reporting. And 37 hours later, the general gets back on the line, or the staff does, and be like, hey, get that warrant officer that was telling us that everything was going to fall apart in 48 hours. So I get on, I start briefing again. And he's like, what's going on in Helmand? I was like, nothing's going on in Helmand. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, everybody's gone. All the comms are gone. Like, Tet offensive is what I call it. I was like, this is like the zipper effect. He's like, the general's like, what's the zipper effect? I was like, when like you're putting on a zipper on a jacket or whatever and it's stubborn, but then you get it and then it goes. I was like, that stubborn thing was Helmand. Everything else is straight to Kabul. And he's like, oh. And he's like, okay, what's going on in Kandahar? Right? And the guy comes on, he's like, oh, Kandahar, we've lost all comms. What's going on in Ghazni? Ghazni, we've lost all comms. And we're like, mind you, I just mentioned the zipper effect, right? And the general's like, oh, right? And so it's like a Titanic moment, right? Like the Titanic cannot sink because it's never sunk before and it's unsinkable. That's what we've all said. And so to be sitting there in that room and be like, oh my God, like the smartest people in the world, I give them grace, right? And give myself grace, give everybody grace. Everybody has a light switch moment in realities. And you're sitting there and you're like, all the light switches are now clicking back on that like, this is it. Click, click, click. It's game over, right? It's not just like game maybe. It's not halftime. It's like game's over. And they're like, all right, pack it all up. Everybody leaves, right? Like when you hear that, you're like, oh, this is done, right? And so for that cognitive dissonance to have happened, but what was amazing is in that 36 hours when I was basically without a job at that point, I had found, so I went to my Konik or my DEF box. I cracked it open and pulled out this old copy of this memoir that I'd found, right? And I found it in 2017 in the archives. It was part of an Army program. I was walking through, you got George Washington's Revolutionary flag over here. You got Normandy maps that still have sand on them over there, right? You're walking around with cotton gloves because you can't touch anything with your actual fingers. And there's this book. It's a big, thick book, leather bound, big brass tabs. Weighs like 10, 15 pounds. I see it and I pull it down. I'm like, oh, this is like, it's like shimmering in my hands, right? I was like, this is cool. I open it up and the pages are wafer thin. It's like onion skin paper. You can see through it. And so I started reading it. And the very first line is like, this is a factual recollection of a secret mission that really happened in 1944.
I'm going to pause you there because we're going to move this to part 2, but I think that's a good way to end part 1.
Yeah.